darlings, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Hahn, and I am a queer opera singer, vocal coach, and cat lover with a genetic chronic illness and now a brand new YouTube. Today I'm tackling a topic I hear about all the time: how to learn Recit. There's so much, and young singers often don't even know where to start, and it gets so repetitive, and you have a deadline to learn it by, and don't worry, I got you covered. In this video tutorial, I'm going to share my whole system of Recit learning with you. It'll make Recit way less scary. And in fact, by the end of it all, you'll see why Recit is the key to your whole character. And therefore it's some of the coolest, most important, and most dramatically informative parts of the entire opera. But before we start, if you were looking for a little corner of the internet where we could discuss opera, disability, queerness, cats, and tea, you have found it. If you weren't looking for it, you have found it anyway. So go hit that subscribe button and ring the little bell so you never miss a video. Today, of course, we will be focusing on opera, but my 3/4 of a liter of jasmine green tea will be helping. So let's start by quickly going over the basics. What is recitative? For those who don't know what recitative, or Recit is, Wikipedia defines it as a style of delivery much used in operas, oratorios, and cantatas, in which a singer is allowed to adopt the rhythms and delivery of ordinary speech. Recitative does not repeat lines as formally composed songs do. It resembles sung, ordinary speech more than a formal musical composition. Don't tell your coaches I'm citing Wikipedia as a source, you guys. It's just that in this case, it happens to be right. You'll often hear this recit, this spoken singing, between the big arias and ensembles. Most of the time it follows the syntax of normal speech very closely, in the ways that the big melodies that you know and love often don't. I mean, O mio babbino caro is really pretty, but we would never say O mio babbino caro in Italian. Sometimes Recit helps the plot move ahead faster, and sometimes it helps give the audience a bit of a break between the emotional high points of the big moments of the show. Now, Recit lives on a bit of a spectrum between secco, or dry Recit, and accompagnato, or accompanied Recit. Secco Recit has very little orchestra beneath it, giving the singer a lot of free rein around the speed and dynamics of each line. Accompagnato Recit, on the other hand, has a bit more orchestra behind it, and a bit more structure to the music. And you'll often find it just at the beginning of big epic arias, where the soprano is about to complain about some scoundrel, or the baritone is about to explode with anger or something. Why is it hard? Recit can be hard to learn because A, there's often a heck of a lot of it, and B, the normal rises and falls in speech don't usually have a lot of variation to them, so naturally Recit doesn't either. This means that the whole 3 hours of it over the course of the whole opera can kinda all start to sound the same when you're playing it over and over again on your piano trying to get it. If you don't have a system in place for learning it, the whole endeavor can be super daunting. But that's what this video is for, giving you a system. How will this help me not hate learning Recit? Look, people only hate learning Recit because it's hard and it's scary and it takes a long time. But if you break it down like we're going to into small, meaningful portions that actually help you gain insight into your character, then the difficulty and the scariness just melt away. These small, meaningful little portions can become the very key with which you unlock your character as a whole. Not just their thoughts and motivations, but in fact, your entire interpretation of them as a person and what the score is telling you about them. Recit shouldn't make the score more intimidating. It should decode it. That's why I love Recit. One more thing. Before we start, I want to talk about this very common idea that we should never, under any circumstances, listen to recordings of the thing that we're learning to prevent ourselves from learning other people's personal interpretations or even mistakes. I understand the fear here, of course, and in most situations I essentially tell my students the same thing. But as you'll see later in the video, the system I'm about to outline does involve listening to some old recordings or watching some other videos. So what's up with that? Well, first of all, in this system, I only ever use recordings and videos before I ever sing a note during the score preparation, to get a sense of the music as a whole. After that point, I fly solo, just me and my piano. Much more importantly, I wanted to address that for some singers, using recordings as references is an access need. Have vision issues or difficulty focusing on sheet music for long periods of time? You might need to use recordings to help you learn your part. Maybe you're a spoonie with a chronic illness and you've discovered that the best way for you to use the energy required to learn your music is flat on your back. You might need to use recordings to help you with that too. Or maybe you're dyslexic and the reading of the lyrics on the page is difficult for you. Recordings could be an excellent guide for you then. None of these things make you any less of an artist. None of these things bar you from being an excellent opera singer. If you know you need to use the help of a recording to get you over the finish line as a matter of making opera accessible to you, that is totally 100% valid. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Now, if using a recording is part of your access needs, we still do have to avoid learning other people's personal interpretations or mistakes. I have some suggestions for that. If you don't need to use recordings to help you learn, memorize, and internalize your music, and just want to jump to the beginning of the tutorial, you can skip to the handy-dandy timestamp I've put on the screen right here. For anyone left here for whom recordings are needed after the score preparation phase, here are my top tips. Firstly, I absolutely 100% recommend getting yourself a rehearsal track to work with. Either a rehearsal track playing your part's vocal line, or a rehearsal track playing the accompaniment for your role, or both. There are many private pianists who will make you these, of course, if that's financially available to you. Or you might be able to purchase existing vocal tracks online, such as on opera practice tracks, or you can buy the accompaniment for whole roles already pre-recorded, such as on Opera Practice Perfect. Link to those websites are down below. They're amazing. If these are not suited to your needs for whatever reason, or if they don't have the piece that you're learning, and you truly must use a vocal recording, I tend to recommend this. First, find 5 random recordings of whatever you're learning. You don't have to check them top to bottom if it's a whole opera, just listen enough to understand the voices involved and the differences from recording to recording. Then, find your favorites. I don't care why they're your favorites. Maybe you found a recording where you really enjoy the soprano, or love the conductor, or love the tempi they chose. But separate the versions you could use again from the ones that aren't useful to you. There could always be one production that uses a completely different edition of the score than you're using, and then maybe that recording is not as helpful. Once you've decided on your favorites, congrats. You have already started analyzing this piece and thinking about it complexly. That's a start when it comes to familiarizing yourself with the music. Then, as you go through the steps and learn the score, keep rotating through those favorites as much as you can, varying it up. And whenever it's possible, go back and find more recordings to add to the rotation. Also, if possible, make sure you're working with a coach as much and as closely as you can be. This is even more important in some cases than it is for people who don't need to use those recordings. Because if you do end up learning little mistakes or other people's personal variations, then your coach can usually help pick those out and help you unlearn them as soon as possible. I know if you have a disability and work in or love opera, then your work ethic is probably already awesome. I know how much work, time, and effort it takes just to make it seem like you've done the same work as everybody else. Use that diligence, stay on the lookout for erroneous information that your recordings might be giving you, and kill it on performance day. I am super proud of you. With that in mind, grab your score and your whiteout and your pens and your highlighter and your mug, and let's learn this bad boy. Hi darlings! Editing Robin here, just dropping by to clarify something that I didn't get a good take of. My system of learning Recit is really focused on how I prepare my score. If I don't prepare my score like this, I don't learn my Recit the way that I really feel like I need to learn my Recit, and I don't love my Recit the way that I know that I can love it. So a lot of this video is focused on score preparation. If you want a video on how I learn and memorize a whole roll, including what I do in coachings and how I spend my time at the piano and how I drill it into my body so that I memorize it, a video on that is coming up soon. Step 1, find the stresses. For this video, I'll be using the one score I have in my house that isn't already completely marked up, Elisir d'amore, or the Elixir of Love. Now, if you're really comfortable singing in Italian, you've done it loads of times, and the rhythm of the language comes naturally to you, you can skip this step, but honestly, I hope you don't. It really does help to clarify meaning, and meaning is our in here. Giving this whole mass of words and notes meaning is the whole point of this entire system. The more ways to do that, the merrier. I'm going to start here with Adina's first recit, and in the Schirmer edition I have, that's on page 69. Unfortunately, I can't give you a completely unobstructed view of my score, or Schirmer might possibly come after my whole hide for copyright reasons, but hopefully this angle at least helps. Belcore starts this recit, but for step 1, I'm moving on to Adina's first line, which is on system 2. All I'm going to do is read it aloud, and as I do, I'm going to underline any stresses I find with this pencil. Ben volentieri. Do this with each line you have. speaking it aloud and underlining the stresses you find. See how we're already breaking down the lines into smaller chunks? These stresses can be anchor points for you to memorize, creating a pulse in the music that directly comes from the speech-like patterns Recit imitates. You've just got to say it out loud until you find it. The more you do this, the easier it becomes. Great work! It can be slow going, I know, but trust that it will be worth it when you memorize later. It really will. It can also make sure you know you're delivering your recit like speech come performance day, rather than singing with equal stresses on each note, which can happen if you haven't done a lot of recit before. Step 2, highlight your part. Now, unless you need recordings for an access reason we've already discussed, this is one of the only times we'll use a video. Go find yourself a production of your opera. A CD you already have, a stream on Met On Demand, or a DVD from Amazon maybe. Today I'm using the audio-only production from 1949 starring Bidou Sayal that's available on Met On Demand. It's at this point that I should make sure that you know that I definitely do not condone searching through YouTube for productions you can find for free. Nope. Now find a good highlighter, one in a color that you think you can get a duplicate of pretty easily in case this one runs out. You want the whole roll in the same color. That way, if you end up singing a different roll in the opera later, you can always tell which one you're looking at just at a glance. Pro tip, avoid highlighting in blue or green if you can. Sometimes those highlighters actually make the text appear darker on the page rather than helping it stand out, so that your score is harder to read at your Sitzprobe or other musical rehearsals. Now you can simply turn on the recording and begin highlighting along with it. If the recording gets ahead of you, just pause until you catch up. Don't try to sing it yet, just listen and read and lay down the highlighter that you need. Doing this with a recording rather than in silence has some big advantages. First, it allows you to start getting an internalized sense of the music and helps you find and make a mental note of the parts of the score that might be difficult for you to learn later. So many singers make the mistake of starting learning their role from the first page and trying to make their way to the end, and they end up much more secure in Act 1 than they are at the finale. And that can be a recipe for disaster. This way, you can start to prioritize your work based on how difficult you expect it to be to learn. Second, you are doing something that is simultaneously visual in looking at the score, auditory in listening to the music, and kinesthetic in laying down that highlighter. This already starts building memorization into you, long before you've sung a note. Later on in the rehearsal process, you might find that having blocking for your recit might help you keep it memorized. And that's good. But if you rely on that as a memorization strategy at the beginning, though, you might find you're not off book by the first rehearsal day, and that is a big no-no. Highlighting as you listen gets your body moving along to the music, connecting action to note from day one, and can make sure you're ready to arrive to rehearsal fully confident in your part. And third, you're stopping and starting. That's good. Studies have repeatedly shown that we remember either the beginning or ending of things best, and that therefore the more little breaks you take, the more little beginnings and endings you're creating in your memorization process. This doesn't just help avoid the pitfall of learning the beginning of the opera better than the end, it also further helps you break down all the recit you have to learn into smaller, more manageable, more memorizable parts. I'm sure you've noticed the pattern by now. Despite the fact that we haven't sung a note of this music yet, we're already thinking about the best ways to memorize it. Step 3, white out the English translation. Here comes the whiteout. I only have 2 ribbons here, but if you're learning a whole roll, you will need way more than this. I once bought every single whiteout at my local Staples store. It didn't last me through 2 scores. Now, if you haven't already noticed, there is a singable English translation that someone worked very hard on, printed underneath the original Italian text in almost every single edition of every single operatic score published in the English-speaking world. I'm sure it was a labor of love to create, but unless you're going to be singing that translation, which honestly is deeply unlikely, since English translations of operas, for the most part, are really unfashionable today. It's only going to get in the way while you're learning. You're going to be putting the literal translation in here next. And won't it be super distracting to see 2 different English translations stacked on top of each other every time you need to glance down at the score? Just imagine yourself a few weeks from now, trying to get off book, and you quickly peek down at the music to remind yourself of where you are, and you see 3 different options of words looking at you. It's too much. And as this singable translation is the only set of words that won't help you learn, we're gonna get rid of it. We're using a recording again, but this is imperative. Choose a different one. You can't get used to just one version. If possible, try to find recordings with as many differing artists as you can, different cast members and different conductors. That way, you're more likely to hear different takes. For this step, I'll be using the Met On Demand Elixir production from 1972, starring Scotto and Bergonzi. Now start your recording and simply follow along in the score, whiting out the unuseful English translation as you go. Like we did with the highlighting, if the recording gets ahead of you, just pause it briefly so you can catch up to it. Unlike the highlighting step, you must white out all parts on the page, not just your own. When I get to the ensembles and the duets and whatnot, I actually don't white out under the repeats anymore because I tend not to put the translation in more than once, but given that this is a Recit video, you should just white out everything. Great! Now your score has tons of space for Step 4, writing in your literal translation. This is the big step, the one that will take you the most time. But by the end of it, you'll know the score really, really well. So well even that when you do take this to the piano, you'll find that you're already a large chunk of the way to memorized. Now the gold standard for literal translations in opera is definitely the work of Nico Castel. Nico was the diction coach at the Met for 3 decades, as well as a comprimario tenor there. And he literally wrote the book on opera translations. Books, actually. He has so many, covering opera translations and IPA pronunciation guides for most of the standard repertoire. You can purchase his amazing operatic translations online. Again, links are in the description. But again, they're not inexpensive. And sometimes you don't have the time to wait for a big giant book to arrive in the mail when a deadline's looming. Now, if you don't have access to that amazing resource, you will have to translate your entire role by hand. If you don't have a copy of what we lovingly nickname the Nico of the opera you're learning, then the recording you should be using for this step should be a video recording with legible subtitles in a language you are fluent in. You'll be using those subtitles as one of your frames of reference to divine meaning on any lines that might be causing you trouble to translate. For this step, I'm using the 2012 production of Elixir from Met On Demand with Netrebko and Polenzani. You'll also need an Italian-English dictionary, but mine is in my phone, which is my camera, don't judge me. A pen, because once this work is done, you will never need to erase it. A tab open to an online version of the libretto and translation if one exists for your music. And another tab open to Google Translate. Yes, I know Google Translate has a horrible reputation of hilariously bad translations. But if you run into several words in a row that you can translate, but you can't figure out the meaning of the phrase as a whole, sometimes typing things into Google Translate can help clarify what the sentence means in its entirety. Then, just start the recording and begin translating. Not just your part, but every word that is spoken that your character might hear and react to. Your starting point should always be the dictionary, since online opera libretti are often mistranslated and even full of typos, so don't lean on those too much, save as reference. The subtitles will help shape general meaning, since they're telling the story in broader strokes. Go to Google Translate only when you're stuck. It is your lifesaver, your last resort. Since this all may be a bit confusing, I'm going to show you exactly what I do. That said, if we translated all of this Recit together right now, this video would be 2 hours long, so I'll just do these first few lines with you. I'm gonna cut out my playing Netrebko production just for this example, because having it on definitely sounds like a fast track to YouTube muting this video, though you should still definitely use it. The first word in this particular Recit is intanto. I looked that up, and my dictionary tells me that this means in the meantime. So I put that directly under the word. Try to space it so your translation stays as close as possible to the word it's translating. Then if you go back to this role years from now and have forgotten the translation by then, you'll have an easier time figuring it out. O mia ragazza means oh, my girl. That's pretty simple. You can write that down. But in English, oh my girl doesn't have the flirty tone that Belcore is using here. That's clear from the subtitles, where instead they've translated this idiom as oh my dear. Anytime knowing some extra context is useful, I write it neatly above the staff in brackets. This particular example may seem pretty obvious to some, but it's a good habit to get into as you work. Later on, you might run into lines that, when literally translated and written down in the order they appear in the original Italian, may make absolutely no sense at all in English, and therefore mean nothing to you, that's a good time to write down a more intelligible English version of the phrase above the staff. Though make sure to leave yourself enough room in the margins to write down eventual blocking in pencil later. Then just keep going until you're done. This may be a several day process if you're doing an entire role, and that's fine. You're allowed to take breaks. If you do have access to the Nico, this might go slightly more quickly. You just need to find a new recording, as we did before, though subtitles are not necessarily required for you, and start and stop playing as you copy in the words from the Nico directly into your score. When you're done, your page should look a little something like this. Congratulations! You have just prepared your score for Recit learning. I usually do one more pass at the score with yet another recording and a different color highlighter, just to mark all of the dynamic markings that I need to be aware of. But since dynamics aren't a huge Recit thing, and since this is a Recit only video, just know that by the time you finish marking up your score, all of your dynamics should be highlighted as well. This part is finally over. You can now take your score to the piano and start to play it, and eventually take it to your coach to study the role with. If applicable to you, you can now put all the recordings away. Now, instead of diving in with absolutely no reference, I bet you feel like you know this opera, its plot, and key point, its hard bits, really well. You probably know how many individual pieces of Recit you have to learn, how long those are, and already have a pretty good sense of what they mean. So take a breath. Is the score less scary now? Do you feel you know better what you have to do to get it memorized? And have you heard enough interpretations of the role to already have a few opinions on some choices you do and don't like? Great. You're doing great. Step 5, take it to the piano. Now, because everybody's brain works differently, and because you'll see more details on this in a future video, I do just have a few tips here. 1, when you finally start playing your part, I cannot recommend strongly enough that you start at the end and work your way forward. 2, as you're working, keep checking in again and again with that literal translation that you wrote. You want to memorize both the Italian and the literal translation simultaneously rather than separately, as that truly does half the time worrying about memorizing the words. 3, take the time to really work out why you think this chord, that word, or that dynamic marking are written in the score. Analyze it complexly. Make decisions. Now that your score is marked up, your stresses are underlined, and every word is translated, you have every tool available at your disposal to try to answer the big question. The one you should answer every time your character does or says anything. Why? Why is my character doing or saying this? What are they trying to achieve by what they're doing? And what is happening in the orchestra that supports or clashes with that goal? These questions are important, but be flexible. If you arrive at rehearsal and the director has a completely different vision of your character than you do, you should be able to answer all these questions for yourself again with their ideas in mind instead. And 4, act with your voice. Write those decisions you make into your score as musical ideas. If your character is short of breath after running in through the door, maybe you have more breath marks in your score. If your character is getting frustrated but there's no dynamic marking written into the score at that time, maybe you choose to write in a crescendo. Vary it up. Everything you do to make one line distinct from the next not only makes your performance more engaging for the audience, it also helps you differentiate one line of Recit from any of the others that sound similar. Beyond that, it's really up to you. Play it and sing it and play it and sing it and bring it to your coach and sing it 1,000 times over again. Step 6, test yourself. Here's the thing, once you're memorized, it will still take a bit before it's completely second nature to you. And we want nothing less than second nature. To get there, we're going to use a trick from the theater. As an exercise, you are going to speak your Recit as fast as humanly possible. If your scene partner is available and down to try it, then I recommend doing it with them, but if not, you can do this by yourself. Try it until you can do every scene with no pauses, all the way through. Of course, you don't want this exercise to start sabotaging your hard work and make you suddenly start singing the recit faster in performance. So definitely do keep on working on it at a normal pace too. But a few goes of this under your breath before going on stage for a complicated bit of recit will help ensure that it is 100% solid and that you are confident in the work you have done. Take a bow. You've made it! Opening night was magical, you were amazing, and the audience laughed and wept and threw you flowers. I'm proud of you. Final thoughts. Like using or not using a recording, some of these steps may be inaccessible to some people. I hope it's become clear by now that any of these steps are modifiable to suit you and your needs. Heck, I've even modified the system myself many times. This isn't even the first version of this system I've created. It's the third. Whatever you need to do, you do you. But the bottom line is this. By systematically taking apart the monolith that is your huge score full of recit, and by breaking down each part of the score into smaller and smaller parts, this giant endeavor becomes not so big and scary anymore. So I hope you enjoyed that deep dive into how to learn recitative. If you learned something today, or if you liked this tutorial and want to see more like it, please like this video down below to let me know. And if you have a really in-depth recit learning system of your own, I would love to hear about it. The more recit tackling strategies we can gather in the comments, the better. And if you know anyone who could use a little guidance with their recit, feel free to share this video with them. Remember to go press that subscribe button and hit the little bell. Keep the comments section full of joy and light, and I will see you in my next video.